good morning. Welcome back to another Pursuit Daily. I'm Matt.
Dana, you should know that by now.
Yeah, hopefully. But maybe it's your first time. So if that's the case, welcome. And we're going to dig into some heavy stuff today.
I mean, just good stuff, like for where we are, for where we are, and hopefully where you are. Relevant stuff.
Yes.
So what's been on our heart a lot in the past 2 weeks, and we have, one week from today of the shelter in place remaining. So depending on how that goes.
For now, that's what it is.
So what God has really impressed, I feel like, on our hearts and really the hearts of the nation is like, we're kind of all feeling like we're in a wilderness. And you might be like, well, that's like a pretty fancy Bible term. Like, what does that mean? So we actually give the definition. And all this to encourage you, like, we're not trying to bring to you like a mini sermon. This is just what we've been studying, where our hearts are, and we're praying it encourages you too. So definition of wilderness from multiple different sources is a lonely, desolate, uninhabitable, deserted by others, deprived by the aid of others, especially friends and acquaintances. So how many of you feel like you're kind of in a wilderness right now? Like a deserted place, abandoned by others. Yeah, so I was just like, wow, God is really doing something in this wilderness season for us. And then that kind of prompted in our hearts, like, looking into different examples in the Bible of when God's people were in the wilderness.
Yeah, and I immediately think of like 3 different specific examples. And there's first, which I talked about the other day, with the Israelites just literally being lost in the wilderness for 40 years. Can you imagine that?
But I'm struggling with 4 days.
40 years, they were just wandering. They were lost, and they were in this wilderness. And who knows what the wilderness was back then. I imagine a lot of the world was wilderness type, this definition, because there wasn't cities, there wasn't houses like we have today. Yeah. But
there wasn't FaceTime.
No, definitely was not FaceTime or Facebook or Face anything.
Yeah,
Face Swap.
Yes.
Remember that one? But then, so I think of them, right? That's obviously a big wilderness moment because that's 40 years. I think of Hagar, which, if you don't know about Hagar, like, that's basically Sarah and Abraham in the Old Testament. Before they were called Sarah and Abraham, they were Sarai and Abram or whatever. Were trying to get pregnant, but they were old. And God told them that they'd have a baby, but Sarah at the time was like, I can't get pregnant, I can't give you the child you want, so sleep with my servant, sleep with this lady Hagar. And like, I guess she thought that was a good idea, and for some reason he thought it was a good idea too. So he said, okay. They get pregnant, they have a kid, and now Sarah starts basically hating this servant of hers because now she has her husband's kid, which is like a Jerry Springer episode.
I was like, this sounds like Jerry Springer. This is not Pursuit Daily.
Long story short, Hagar is like, I can't handle this, and she runs away, pregnant, baby in tow, whatever the situation was, and she runs off into the wilderness. And she's like, God, I don't know what to do. And she's basically just running away. And then the other example I can think of off the top of my head is Elijah. And Elijah, when basically they're coming to kill him, and he's running away just to get away. And he ends up in the wilderness, and he's like, God, just take me. I have nothing left to live for, and I don't know what to do with my life, so just take me. And it's funny because in all these seasons, in all these situations, God totally redeems them. God saves them. God is with them. In the Israelites' case, it took 40 years. In these other people, in Elijah's case, I think it was 40 days. And then Hagar, I don't know that we really know how long it was. That's not the point. The point is that God came and redeemed all of them. When Elijah was stuck in a cave, or actually before he made it to the cave, and he was hiding under a tree just like waiting to die, an angel came to him and said, Elijah, what are you doing? And basically woke him up. And he gave him food, he gave him water, and he's like, what is this? And he gave him what he needed. He gave him enough energy to make it to this cave where he could sleep and survive and
I think that
live another day.
I think that that's where we come into, like, so many times we want to know what's happening 6 months from now. And a lot of times God doesn't reveal that to us because he's giving us what we need for that day.
Right.
I know each day I'm like, God, I know your mercies are new every morning, but today I'm really needing you to pour into my heart in this area. And he gives me exactly what I need for that day. Or as the Bible says, he gives me the manna needed for that day.
Exactly.
And I think another really great thing to know about the wilderness is not to question why we're in it, not to question who brought us into it, but to really just say, like, what is going to come from this? What are you going to allow? What are you going to kind of cultivate in this time that's going to grow you or strengthen you? Or just allow your heart to be fully dependent on God in this time. And I think that that's where I've been struggling because, I talk to friends, I'm like, I'm just so tired. And then instantly God kind of shifts and refocuses my heart to be like, but I'm sustaining you. So like, quit saying you're so tired because I'm here. And like the point of this wilderness is not so you can do X, Y, and Z, all of these things on your own. It's so that you can gain full dependence on me. And I think what's so amazing, Matt mentioned the people in the Bible, but also Jesus. So we're studying that a little. It's a kind of a big one. Jesus. Kind of up to him. A little bit. So the interesting thing about Jesus is before he was led into the wilderness and to be tempted by Satan, he was actually baptized by John. So he gained full revelation, full spirit power when he was baptized. And then the Bible says in Mark 1:12 that right after Jesus was baptized, he was immediately sent in.
Like hair and beard still dripping.
Like immediately.
Still wet, right? Fresh out of the water.
No towel, just immediately the Spirit sent him into the wilderness to be tempted by the enemy. And I think that is so powerful because a lot of times, like the season that Matt and I are in, and maybe you too, is like God shows you a glimpse of a promise. And we don't always know what it looks like. We question, God, what is it? I feel this shifting. I feel this in my heart. God gives you a glimpse of the promise, and then sometimes right immediately we are led into the wilderness. And that's honestly where Matt and I are right now. Like, we're just in this place of hungering God and kind of dying to self. And I think the amazing thing about Jesus in the wilderness, it was 40 days and 40 nights that he was fasting and tempted by the enemy. But the enemy's ultimate goal was to make Jesus bow down to him and forget the promise that God put in his heart, because the enemy was tempting Jesus to just give way and give his own desires to take over. And I think so many times that's where we lose sight of God's promise, is when we are overtaken by our own desires, our own flesh, to play video games or do this or just sit down and watch a movie instead of being in the promises of God and like trusting that promise. And not to say, I mean, last night we sat down and watched a movie. Like, we are not spiritual holy rollers, like always in the Word, always doing this. But in this time, I think God is really desiring for you to come out of this stronger, not necessarily in your own flesh, but in your spirit, and of the stronger dependency on God.
For sure. And let's not hope it's 40 days or 40 years for any of us.
Yeah.
We'll stick with the 21 days at the most.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
And I think, too, the wilderness is preparation ground for the fruit to come. So our actual word for this year is cultivate, which I didn't even know what that meant. I literally had to look it up. But it's just preparing the ground. And in America, in the nation, in the world, I feel like God is truly using this time to prepare us for what's ahead for the kingdom. And also I put down here, as I was studying this, Matt and I were studying this, it says, the wilderness tests us, humbles us, strengthens us, refines us, and molds godly character in us. So I'm still working on that last one, molding godly character. My patience is tested daily. Yeah. We're still working on that one a little bit. So I don't know, what do you guys feel like? Are you in a part of the wilderness right now where you feel like there has been a promise spoken to you, but you're yet to see it? And how are you using this time to kind of refocus on that, refine that, let God speak to that?
Yeah. Because the wilderness is not only a place of hardship, but it's also oftentimes, as we've seen with those biblical examples and maybe even some of the stuff you're going through right now, it's also a time where God really, it's like God's self-revelation. Like, he really reveals himself to you if you allow him to, and if you use that time for that purpose. I wrote down a quote by Richard Rohr, who's a big author, pretty popular author. And not so much a quote, but just something he references all the time, that there's often only two things that really can change people. It's great love or it's great suffering. And it's interesting because I think in the time of wilderness and the examples that we know of, you kind of have both.
You can experience both in the wilderness, because you can either focus on what you don't have, and that can be great suffering, focus on what you've lost, or be in a place of great love, which also is a lot of times manifested in, what'd you say, our friends?
Yeah,
our
like
family, angels.
Like anytime angels appear to us, it's like in the sense of like our friends or our family in that form of church community.
Yeah.
You know, now it's a little more difficult because we might not be able to do that in person as much, but still having that connection with other people, and ultimately just God's love. We get that sense of God's true love.
Yeah. And I think not allowing the wilderness to bring you to a place of isolation, because that's what the enemy wants for you. He wants to bring you to a place of isolation, but allow this time in the wilderness, wherever you're at, to truly just put a fire inside of you to continue to serve. What does that look like? Continue to pray for others, continue to be in your word, continue to watch movies, because there's a natural side of things too. But
rest.
also just
that rest is what that is.
Being at rest. But just continuing to hear God's voice, because the wilderness truly is the greatest opportunity to gain full dependency on God. So we could literally talk about this. Again. Okay. The wilderness is our opportunity to gain fully dependency on God.
Yeah.
And I think that, just diving into that, we could talk about this all day. Like, this is a baby for us because we are going through the wilderness right now, and we've been like, but God is just truly pouring into us in this time. So we just encourage you wherever you're at. We would love to hear what kind of you're walking through, how you're handling it. I know we're big servants, so like for us being home, it's like, we want to serve, we want to love people, but that's what we're doing here. So pray you got something out of today, and that God's continuing to just mold and shape your heart in this wilderness season, and we will see you.
We'll be back tomorrow. It'll be our last Tuesday tomorrow. Guys, we're within a week, so that means it's our last Tuesday.
Shelter in place.
This time tomorrow will be our last, or this time next week will be our last one, and well, who knows what the government's going to do.
We're doing 21 days,
but we're stopping at 21.
We have not
too much. No.
We
love you.
Pray that we be encouragement to you.
Absolutely.
Have a great day, guys.
See ya.
See you tomorrow.